Ethan Calloway never expected to find himself standing between a single woman's farm and a powerful mining corporation. As he stared at the broken-down silos on Sarah Mitchell's property, his years of experience as a gold mine mechanic suddenly seemed like fate rather than a painful past he was trying to escape. What Ethan didn't know was that beneath the struggling Nebraska farmland lay resources worth millions. And Sarah had no idea she was sitting on a fortune. As corporate vultures circled, this unlikely pair would discover that the greatest treasure wasn't what lay beneath the soil, but what could grow from it. Every subscriber means the world to me, and your support keeps these incredible stories coming. If you love heartwarming journeys and unexpected twists, hit that subscribe button and like the video. Ethan and his daughter Grace's lives are about to change forever. Poor mechanic fights drilling company. And no idea she owns thousands of acres worth millions of dollars. What happens when your last hope breaks down on a dusty Nebraska road? For Ethan Calloway, the sputtering death of his old pickup felt like the final chapter of his troubled story. Smoke billowed from beneath the hood of Ethan's rusted Ford F-150 as it shuddered to a stop. The late afternoon sun stretched shadows across endless cornfields, while the acrid smell of burning oil filled his nostrils. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, panic rising in his chest. "Dad, is our truck sick again?" 8-year-old Grace peered up from her tattered copy of Charlotte's Web, dark curls framing her face. Her blue backpack, the only new thing he'd managed to give her this year, sat beside a cardboard box containing their meager possessions. Ethan forced a smile. "Just needs to catch its breath, sweetheart." He stepped into the sweltering heat, the gravel crunching beneath his boots. The radiator hissed angrily, steam escaping into the summer air. "Is this our new home?" Grace pressed her nose against the window. "You said we'd have a house with a garden. Can we grow carrots?" The question hung in the air. Ethan stared at the smoking engine, his last $300 weighing heavy in his wallet, the mechanic job still miles away. "We're just taking a detour," he finally answered. Adventures always have detours. As Ethan stood helpless, he felt eyes on him. A woman watched from the edge of a nearby field, her stance as sturdy as the weathered farmhouse behind her. Something in her watchful gaze made him stand straighter, summoning dignity he scarcely felt. She approached deliberately, boots kicking up dust. Her faded plaid shirt and worn jeans told of years under the Nebraska sun. Up close, Ethan noted the wariness in her eyes, someone who had learned caution the hard way. "Car trouble?" she asked matter-of-factly. "Yes, ma'am. Radiator's shot, I think. We'll be moving along soon as I figure something out." Sarah Mitchell, though Ethan didn't know her name yet, surveyed everything from his calloused hands to the sleeping bag visible through the window. Her attention shifted when Grace rolled down her window. "Hi. I'm Grace. I'm 8. Do you live in that house? Does it have a garden?" The little girl's enthusiasm softened Sarah's expression. "Yes to both," Sarah replied before turning back to Ethan. "There's a phone at my place. You can call a tow. And I've got water for your radiator, though I doubt that'll fix it." "That's mighty kind of you. We won't be any trouble." The walk revealed more than words. Help wanted sign, well-tended fields surrounded buildings in need of repair. A massive barn stood with peeling paint, 2 silos showing storm damage. Everything spoke of perseverance against mounting odds. Inside her kitchen, over homemade lemonade, Sarah's suspicion gradually yielded to compassion. When the mechanic's quote made Ethan's heart sink, Sarah cleared her throat. "I've got a spare room and plenty needing fixing. That John Deere hasn't run right in months. 3 mechanics couldn't figure it out. Look handy. And help wanted, you know. Maybe we can help each other." Ethan barely dared believe his luck. "I worked as a heavy-duty mechanic for years, ma'am. If it's got an engine, I can probably fix it." By noon the next day, Sarah's tractor purred like new, a fuel injection problem the locals had missed. The grateful surprise in her eyes marked their first genuine connection. As Sarah watched her tractor run smoothly for the first time in months, she had no idea that 20 miles away, Marcus Reynolds was studying satellite imagery of her farm with unusual intensity. In his corner office at Reynolds Mining Headquarters, the CEO traced lines across the topographical map. The geological survey team exchanged glances as Reynolds tapped a specific area of the Mitchell farm. "Gentlemen, the seismic imaging confirms it. This property sits atop one of the richest shale gas deposits we've encountered in the Midwest," Reynolds stated, his voice carrying the calm of someone discussing millions in potential profit. And this stubborn woman stands between us and a fortune. The chief geologist nodded. The surveys indicate exceptional yield potential. The surrounding properties you've acquired form a perfect extraction network, but without the Mitchell farm as the centerpiece, the operation loses 40% efficiency. Reynolds straightened his tie. Then we'll have to be more persuasive. Back at the farm, Sarah and Ethan worked side by side on the damaged silo, their conversation deepening with each metal sheet they secured. My great-grandfather built these silos in 1932, Sarah said, her hand running along the weathered metal. During the Dust Bowl when everyone else was abandoning their farms, he stayed. Mitchell land isn't just dirt, it's legacy. Ethan listened, his hands working steadily. The rhythm of repair felt natural to him, contrasting with Sarah's financial strain evident in her careful rationing of supplies. The bank's been patient, but patience has limits, she admitted. 2 bad harvests put me underwater. I've been robbing Peter to pay Paul so long I've forgotten who I borrowed from first. From below, Grace's laughter floated up as she fed carrots to an ancient palomino. The child had blossomed, collecting eggs each morning and naming every barn cat she encountered. Your daughter's a natural, Sarah observed. Farm life suits her. Ethan nodded. The dark circles under Grace's eyes had faded, replaced by sunburned cheeks and boundless energy. As they worked, Sarah pointed out landmarks, occasionally slipping into memories, swimming in the pond during summers, sledding down the eastern hill in winter, helping her father with midnight calving. The Wilsons sold last month, she said suddenly. Been neighbors for 4 generations. The Kellers went before them and the Hansons last year. Her voice hardened. Reynolds Mining bought them all out for undisclosed sums that somehow allowed lifelong farmers to retire to Florida overnight. The next morning, Ethan discovered specialized equipment hidden in the tall grass, seismic monitors and soil sampling kits strategically placed along the property line. This wasn't random prospecting, it was targeted surveillance. Days later, while repairing a storage shed, Ethan found a loose floorboard concealing a portfolio of geological surveys from 15 years earlier. Sarah's father had commissioned them, revealing a massive shale gas deposit worth millions. The attached note read, "For Sarah when the time comes. Not to sell but to know your strength." Ethan sat back, documents spread before him. The land Sarah fought to keep was potentially her salvation. But in the wrong hands, those resources could devastate the soil she'd spent her life tending. That night, as moonlight filtered through the cracked window of Sarah's guest bedroom, Ethan jerked awake in a cold sweat. For a moment he wasn't in Nebraska at all, but back in the suffocating darkness of Tunnel 6, where support beams had given way. The faces of trapped men haunted his dreams. The digital clock read 3:17 a.m. Knowing sleep wouldn't return, Ethan stepped quietly onto the farmhouse's wraparound porch. The night air carried the scent of hay and distant rain, so different from the chemical-laden atmosphere of the mines. "Can't sleep either?" Sarah's voice startled him. She sat in a rocking chair that creaked softly with each motion, a quilt pulled around her shoulders despite the mild night. "Bad dreams," he admitted, feeling the cool porch railing beneath his palms. Sarah nodded, not pushing. The silence between them felt comfortable, a shared understanding of carrying burdens. "I saw you watching those surveyors yesterday," she finally said. "You recognized what they were doing." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I've seen their equipment before. The way they're testing, it's not just for standard geological surveys." "You know a lot about mining operations for a mechanic," Sarah observed carefully. "I fixed the equipment, but I saw everything. The shortcuts. The falsified reports. When profit matters more than people." The next morning, while repairing a fence line, Ethan spotted a familiar face among the survey team beyond Sarah's property marker. "Calloway. I thought you'd disappeared after Colorado. Reynolds will go ballistic if he knows you're here." "I'm just fixing a fence, Peterson," Ethan replied without looking up. "Like you were just fixing that ventilation system before testifying?" Peterson glanced nervously over his shoulder. "Reynolds blames you for everything." 3 men died because of expired support beams, Ethan hissed. "I didn't cause that. Be careful. This isn't just about gas rights anymore." Back at the farm, Ethan found Grace with Sarah, discussing how seeds become crops. "Dad, Miss Sarah says the mining company wants to dig under the farm. Would that hurt the seeds we planted?" The innocent question hit Ethan like a physical blow, remembering his daughter pressing sunflower seeds into soil, planning for a future they might not see. That evening, Sarah shared her story, rushing home when her father had his heart attack, her mother following him to the grave a year later. "I never planned to spend my life here," she admitted. "But now I can't imagine letting it go." "Sometimes life chooses our path for us," Ethan replied softly. Days later at the town's diner, mine surveyors were discussing unreasonable landowners when they spotted Ethan. "Well, look who it is. The whistleblower who cost 40 men their jobs." "3 men died," Ethan replied steadily. "I have documentation proving Reynolds Mining falsified safety records. Those families deserved the truth." Turning to Sarah, guilt and resolve mingling in his eyes, he finally revealed, "That's why I left everything behind. After the trial, the threat started. I couldn't risk Grace's safety." His voice broke, words falling between them like the first drops of a cleansing rain. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. But when I saw their equipment here using the same tactics..." The weight of Ethan's confession hung in the diner's silent air as faces turned from shock to understanding. What happens when a small town discovers that the battle they thought was about land rights is actually about their very survival? For Sarah Mitchell, standing against Reynolds Mining had always been personal, but now the stakes had risen beyond anything she could have imagined. Word spread through Millfield like wildfire. By Friday evening, the community center overflowed with residents, some standing along walls, others spilling onto the sidewalk. Marcus Reynolds took the podium, his tailored suit contrasting sharply with the worn jeans and weathered faces of generational farmers. "Progress isn't something to fear," Marcus declared, displaying renderings of revitalized streets and businesses. "Our operation brings 200 jobs. Your children can stay instead of moving away. Restaurants will fill. Shops will thrive." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sarah watched neighbors nod along, hope flickering in tired eyes. Bill Henderson, whose equipment dealership barely survived, stood up. "My son moved to Omaha last year. Are these real jobs? Not just temporary positions?" 15 years minimum of extraction with permanent management positions, Marcus replied, smile unwavering. Sarah felt the room tilting toward Reynolds. When she approached the microphone, her hands trembled slightly. "My father taught me that good land is a promise to future generations," she began, voice strengthening. "Contaminated groundwater cannot be restored. Our grandchildren will face consequences long after Reynolds Mining leaves." She raised a jar of clear water. "From the well my great-grandfather dug. What happens when their unnamed chemicals seep into this?" An uncomfortable silence fell. The community fractured before her eyes, those desperate for economic salvation opposing those fearing environmental catastrophe. That night, Sarah and Ethan worked at her kitchen table surrounded by surveys and maps. Grace slept on the couch, curled around a stuffed rabbit from the Henderson children. "She looks happy here," Sarah said softly. "Like she belongs." Ethan's expression softened. "I haven't seen her make friends that quickly since." He left the thought unfinished. They worked late, shoulders occasionally brushing as they leaned over documents, the contact sending warmth through Sarah's tired body. Morning brought trouble. Sarah's recently repaired irrigation pump had failed. By afternoon, 3 farmers reported similar failures. Wells near Reynolds' properties produced murky water. "It's not coincidence," Ethan said, examining the pump. "Pressure tactics to force holdouts to sell. Reynolds knows I'm here now. Things will escalate. What do we do?" "I still have contacts who might help." Ethan made calls, reconnecting with his past. 3 days later, Ethan returned with a former Reynolds engineer willing to speak. Their documentation revealed plans to use fracking chemicals known to contaminate groundwater, chemicals restricted elsewhere but permitted through Nebraska loopholes. At an emergency town meeting, they presented evidence showing Reynolds Mining's true plans. Photos of contaminated wells shocked even the company's strongest supporters. "This isn't about one woman's farm anymore," Ethan told the unified room. "This is about whether your town will exist in 20 years. By meeting's end, the community stood together. Even Bill Henderson withdrew his support. People approached Sarah with offers of help, legal assistance, media contacts, political connections. The outpouring of community support marked a turning point, but Reynolds Mining had billions at stake and wouldn't simply walk away. Sarah knew this as she watched Marcus Reynolds storm out of the community center, his parting words hanging in the air like a storm cloud. "This isn't over." Not by a long shot. 2 days later, Reynolds made his move. At the county courthouse, Sarah sat beside Ethan as Reynolds' attorney presented relevant background information about Ethan, displaying his whistleblower history. "Mr. Calloway is a disgruntled former employee with a vendetta," the attorney declared. "A man who cost dozens of Americans their jobs with his claims." When asked to respond, Ethan stood with surprising calm. "Everything in those documents is true," he said steadily. "I blew the whistle on unsafe practices. I testified about falsified records. And 3 men died because those warnings went unheeded." He faced the packed courtroom. "I know his methods better than anyone, and I understand what's at stake for Millfield: your clean water, your farmland, your health." Rather than diminishing Ethan's credibility, Reynolds' attack strengthened it. By morning, 5 neighboring counties had reached out about their own pending Reynolds mining permits. The community rallied around Sarah in unexpected ways. Tom Greenfield offered his legal services pro bono. Martha Jenkins researched historic land rights cases. Teenagers set up lemonade stands for a legal defense fund. "I never knew I had so many friends," Sarah confessed to Ethan one evening as they reviewed affidavits from community members detailing their reliance on the aquifer beneath her land. "You fought for them when they needed it," Ethan replied. "Now they're fighting for you." The night before a crucial hearing, Sarah found Grace helping organize paperwork at the kitchen table. "Miss Sarah," Grace said suddenly, "when we win, can we stay here forever? I told my new friends we would." Sarah's hands stilled. She'd been so focused on saving the farm she hadn't thought beyond the fight itself. Looking at Grace's hopeful expression, she realized this battle had become about more than just her family's legacy. "I'd like that very much," she answered softly. During the legal battle, Ethan worked with neighboring farms, implementing sustainable practices. He taught Jim Fisher about crop rotation. He helped the Andersons modify their irrigation system to reduce water usage. "Before all this," Frank Anderson told him, "I was considering Reynolds' offer too. Now I think we might have a shot." 3 months later, Sarah met with Marcus Reynolds at his office. "Our final offer," he said, sliding a document toward her. "Full market value plus 20%. Sarah studied the figure. "Enough money to live comfortably for life." "I've been thinking about value," she said finally. "About what my land is worth to everyone who depends on it." What emerged was unprecedented: a community land cooperative that allowed Sarah to retain ownership while implementing carefully regulated resource extraction under strict environmental protocols, providing economic benefits while preserving the land's agricultural viability for generations. The first rays of dawn were just breaking over the eastern fields when Sarah spotted him. Ethan, his weathered duffel bag already packed, was loading the last of his possessions into the repaired truck. The battle was won, the community saved, his job done. Sarah stood watching, her heart sinking as she realized what she should have known all along. Ethan Calloway was preparing to leave. "Were you going to say goodbye?" she asked, stepping from the shadow of the barn. Ethan's shoulders tensed before he turned. "I thought it might be easier this way." "Easier for who?" Sarah crossed her arms, the morning chill giving her an excuse for the shiver that ran through her. "Grace is still asleep. She'll be heartbroken. This is what I do, Sarah. I move on." His voice lacked conviction as he looked between her and the open road. "The cooperative is established. The legal framework is solid." "This isn't about the farm," Sarah interrupted, stepping closer. "This place needs you. The land speaks a language you've learned to understand. And we, Grace and I, we need you too." For a man who'd spent years dismantling mining equipment, Ethan had never encountered something as difficult to take apart as the barriers he'd built around himself. His hand rested on the truck door, caught between habitual escape and unfamiliar desire to stay. Inside the farmhouse, Grace appeared at the kitchen window. When she spotted her father by the truck, her expression shifted from confusion to alarm. She disappeared from view. The screen door slammed. Footsteps pounded across the yard. "Dad, are we leaving?" Her voice cracked with panic. "I was just..." He was just getting some tools, Sarah interrupted smoothly. For the new greenhouse project. Right, Ethan? Their eyes met, and in that moment something shifted between them. Actually, Grace, Ethan said slowly, moving away from the truck. I was thinking about staying here. Not just for now, but for good. Grace's face lit up. With the chickens and Sarah and everything? With everything, Ethan confirmed, his eyes never leaving Sarah's. In the months that followed, the Mitchell farm became a living laboratory for blended stewardship. Ethan's expertise found new purpose in water conservation systems. Sarah expanded beyond traditional crops, introducing organic methods that restored soil health damaged by generations of industrial agriculture. The farmhouse that had stood silent for too long filled with laughter again. What began as an alliance between a whistleblower and a landowner transformed into a family forged in shared struggle. 1 year later, visitors arrived to study the Millfield model, marveling at how farming practices merged with sustainable resource extraction. On a warm afternoon, Sarah found Ethan and Grace in the apple orchard. Grace was positioning a sapling while Ethan explained how to ensure its roots would grow strong. This is a special kind of tree, he was saying. It's called a legacy apple. So it'll be here even when we're super old? Grace asked, patting soil around the trunk. It'll be here long after that, Sarah said, joining them. That's why we plant trees, for people we'll never meet. As they secured the young tree, Sarah caught Ethan's eye over their daughter's head. The land had shown them what it knew all along, that Sarah's inheritance wasn't measured in mineral rights, but in its power to root a family who had forgotten what belonging meant. As the sun painted the horizon in shades of amber and gold, Ethan, Sarah, and Grace stood together on the porch of their shared home. The farm that almost slipped away had transformed into something more precious than the minerals beneath it. Home is where one starts from, Sarah whispered, watching Grace skip toward the apple orchard. The evening light caught in her daughter's hair as Ethan placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. For these three who had drifted alone for so long, finding each other meant discovering roots. Together they witnessed their new beginning unfold, proving that courage to build something lasting outvalues any fortune hidden beneath the soil.